Don't go, ma'am. John's grip on my wrist tightened, his eyes wide with panic as I tried to pull away. I had always thought of him as a simple gardener, someone who tended to the flowers and kept the lawn tidy. But now, standing in the dim light of the hallway, his hands were shaking, and his voice was filled with urgency. Please, don't leave. You have to stay. I froze, my mind racing. Why was he so frantic? Why was he stopping me from leaving? John, what's going on? I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. He hesitated, his eyes darting nervously toward the front door. They're here, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Who? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. The people who've been watching you, he murmured, looking around as if expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I stepped back slowly, pulling my wrist from his grasp. I don't understand, I said, my voice trembling. Who's been watching me? But John didn't answer. He just stepped aside, motioning for me to follow him into the living room. As I hesitated, my eyes were drawn to the window. That's when I saw it. A black van, parked across the street. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen anyone approach, and the van was too close for comfort. My heart began to race as I looked back at John, who was standing by the door, watching me intently. John, what's going on? I repeated, my voice rising in panic. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening. He looked around nervously again, then sighed, as if he had no choice but to tell me the truth. They've been watching you for a while now, he said, his voice shaking. They know everything about you. About your house. They want it. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Who wants my house? I demanded. Who are these people? But John just shook his head. I can't say. You need to leave. It's not safe here anymore. Please, just trust me. My head was spinning. I couldn't make sense of it all. Why hadn't I noticed anything strange before? Why hadn't I seen the signs? I had lived in this house for nearly 40 years, and now, out of nowhere, everything felt wrong. I glanced back at the van outside, then at John, who seemed to be desperately urging me to do something. Anything, to get out of the house. But the more he insisted, the more confused I became. What did he mean by not safe? What was going on? I wasn't the kind of person to run away without understanding the full story, and right now, I felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. I turned back to the door, my mind racing with questions. John, you have to explain more, I said, my voice barely audible. But he just shook his head again, his expression pleading. I can't. Just leave, before it's too late. I hesitated, caught between the fear in John's eyes and the uncertainty of the situation. But before I could make a decision, I heard the faint sound of footsteps outside the door. A heavy, deliberate knock echoed through the house, making my heart leap into my throat. My body tensed. Someone was at the door. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I slowly turned to face John. His face had gone pale, his hands trembling. They're here, he whispered. And then, the doorbell rang. I froze. My mind screamed at me to run, to leave before whoever was out there could get inside. But something held me in place, something deeper than fear. It was as if my body refused to listen to my brain. Slowly, I backed away from the door and retreated into the living room. The sound of the doorbell still echoed in my ears, and my heart was thudding in my chest. I didn't know who was out there, or what they wanted, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let them in, not without knowing who they were. The footsteps outside grew louder, and I felt a surge of panic rise in my chest. John, what do? I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. But he didn't answer. He just stood there, watching the door with wide, fearful eyes. I looked back at the window, my heart pounding. The black van was still there, parked across the street, its engine running. Whoever they were not here by accident. I could feel my hands trembling, but I forced myself to breathe deeply. There was no turning back now. I had to find out who was behind all of this, and why they were targeting me. But as I stood there, frozen, the doorbell rang again. And this time, it was louder, more urgent. My entire body was shaking now. There was no escaping it. Something was happening, and I had no idea what it was. My heart was pounding as the doorbell rang a third time, the sound echoing through the house like a warning. I stood frozen, my body trembling with uncertainty, unsure of what to do. The footsteps outside were louder now, and I could hear the faint rustling of voices, low and unintelligible. Whoever was out there was no longer just passing by. They were here for a reason. I glanced at John, who was still standing by the door, his eyes wide with fear. He looked at me for a moment before turning his gaze back to the door. "You have to go," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's not safe." But I didn't move. I couldn't. Something deep inside me was telling me that if I ran now, I might never understand what was really happening. I wasn't about to let fear take control. "What do you mean, not safe?" I asked, my voice more steady than I felt. John took a step closer, his hands shaking as he pressed them together in front of him, as if he were pleading with me. "They're here because of the house, because of you," he said urgently, his words hanging in the air like a thick fog. "You need to get out now." My mind was racing, trying to piece together what John had just said. It didn't make sense. I had lived in this house for decades. It was my home. Why would anyone want to take it? And why would John, who had always been nothing more than the gardener, be so involved in something so sinister? I turned back toward the door, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I needed to know more. I couldn't leave without answers. As I took a cautious step forward, I saw the shadow of someone standing outside, just beyond the frosted glass. The silhouette was tall, moving slowly, deliberately. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. Another knock echoed through the house. The sound was soft, but it was enough to send a jolt of fear through me. Who were these people? What did they want? I walked to the window and peered out, my hands trembling as I looked for any clue that could explain what was going on. The black van was still there, parked across the street, its engine running quietly. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the very walls of my home were closing in on me. I felt like a trapped animal, unsure of where to turn or who to trust. "John," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Tell me everything. Now." He hesitated, glancing at the door once more before finally meeting my gaze. "They've been watching you for a while," he said, his voice low. "The people in the van, they're not just anyone. They've been tracking you, your every move." I shook my head in disbelief. "Tracking me? Why? What do they want from me?" John swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously as he seemed to search for the right words. "They think you have something. Something they need." My mind raced. What could I possibly have that would be so important to someone? This house, my things. None of it made sense. I felt a pang of anger, a sharp feeling of injustice. How could this be happening to me? I had worked so hard to build a life here, a home, and now it seemed that everything was about to be ripped away. I could feel the weight of the years pressing down on me, the years spent caring for this house, keeping it beautiful, making it my own. And now, just like that, everything was in jeopardy. "You need to leave," John repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "They're coming for you. You don't have much time." I felt a rush of panic surge through me, but I held it back. I wasn't going to run. Not yet. I turned away from the door, walking to the kitchen to gather my thoughts. I needed to think, to understand what was happening. As I walked, I glanced out the window again. The van was still there, and for the first time, I noticed the two men standing by the vehicle. They were looking directly at the house. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. But for what? And who were these men? I turned back to John, my mind swirling with questions. "Who are they?" I asked again, my voice strained. John was silent for a moment, then spoke, his voice barely audible. "They're from the company," he said. "The one that wants the house." The words hit me like a slap in the face. The company? What did he mean by that? Who was behind all this? I had no answers, just more questions, and I knew I needed to get to the bottom of it. I needed to find out who was behind this plot and what they wanted from me. "I'm not going anywhere until I know what's going on," I said firmly, my resolve hardening. John's face fell, and he nodded in defeat. "I knew you wouldn't listen to me," he said quietly. "But I had to try." I looked back at the window, then at the door. The men outside were still watching. They knew I was here, and I knew that soon, I would have to face them. I wasn't sure how I would get through this, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going down without a fight. The air in the house felt heavy, like a storm was brewing just beyond the door. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, trying to calm my racing heart. The men outside were still there, their presence like an invisible weight pressing down on me. John was pacing, his footsteps quick and jittery as he ran his hands through his hair. I could see the panic in his eyes, and for the first time, I began to understand the depth of the situation. You don't know who they are, do you? I asked, my voice breaking the silence. John stopped pacing and looked at me, his face pale. I do, but I don't think you'll believe me. He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully, before continuing. They're part of a group that's been trying to take control of properties like yours. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want. My mind raced. I had heard rumors of companies buying up old properties, but I never imagined something like this would happen to me. Why me? I asked, my voice shaking with confusion. Why are they targeting my home? John's eyes flickered toward the window, where the men were still standing. Because you have something they need, he said softly, almost as if he were afraid to say it out loud. The deed to this house. It's more valuable than you think. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The deed? What was so special about it? It was just a piece of paper. But John's expression told me there was more to it than I realized. I don't understand, I said, stepping closer to him. What do they want with it? John's voice dropped to a whisper. There's more to this house than you know. The land, the history, it's worth millions. And they want it. They'll do anything to get their hands on it. I took a step back, trying to process what John had just said. $1 million properties? Hidden histories? It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. But I had learned long ago that reality could be stranger than fiction. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why not just leave, John? He looked at me, his eyes full of regret. Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't warn you. They're dangerous people, and they're going to keep coming until they get what they want. I felt a lump form in my throat as I tried to make sense of the situation. I had lived in this house for so long, raised my children here, watched them grow up. This was my home. And now it seemed that someone wanted to take it from me. I didn't know how, but I knew I wasn't going to let that happen without a fight. I turned back toward the window, my hands shaking as I looked out at the men standing by the van. They were still watching the house, waiting for something. Or someone. And I realized, in that moment, that I was the one they were waiting for. I had to make a choice. I could leave, like John suggested, and run away from this mess. Or I could stay and face whatever was coming. But I wasn't ready to give up my home. Not without knowing exactly who was behind this and why they were doing this. I walked over to the door and opened it slightly, peering out. The men were still there, talking quietly among themselves, their backs turned to me. I could feel my pulse quicken as I stepped back, closing the door softly. They had no idea that I was still inside. But they would. Soon enough, they would. I turned to John, my resolve hardening. I'm not leaving, I said firmly. If they want this house, they're going to have to take it from me. John looked at me, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. You don't know what you're up against, he warned. These people won't hesitate to do whatever it takes. I don't care, I said, my voice steady. This is my home, and I'm not going to let anyone take it from me. Not without a fight. I could see the fear in John's eyes, but also a glimmer of something else, respect. All right, he said quietly. But you need to be careful. They'll come for you in ways you can't even imagine. I nodded, turning away from him to face the door. It was time to prepare for whatever was coming. I didn't know how this would end, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them win. Not without a fight. The silence in the house was deafening as I stood by the door, trying to steady my breath. John had warned me that I was making a dangerous decision, but there was no turning back now. I wasn't about to let these strangers take my home, not without a fight. I walked over to the window again, looking out at the men in the black van. They hadn't moved, and the eerie stillness made the situation feel even more surreal. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to calm myself, but the tension in the air was palpable. I needed a plan, but what could I do against people who had already been watching me for weeks? What was it about this house that made it so valuable to them? As I stood there, the minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. I couldn't keep waiting. I had to take action. I turned to John, who was still standing in the corner of the room, watching me carefully. We can't just sit here, I said, my voice steady but firm. I need to know what they want and why they're here. I'm not leaving without answers. John looked at me, his expression full of concern. You don't know what you're dealing with, he said quietly. These people don't play by the rules. If you keep pushing them, they'll make you regret it. I understood his fear, but I couldn't just sit back and let them take control of my life. This house meant everything to me. I had raised my children here, watched them grow up, and built a life from nothing. It was all I had left. I don't care, I replied, my voice growing stronger. I'm not going to let them win. I've fought too hard for this life to just walk away from it now. John sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. All right, he said, but you need to be careful. You don't know how far they're willing to go. I nodded, turning back to the window. The van was still there, the men still waiting. I knew they would make their move soon, and I had to be ready. I walked over to the kitchen, opening the drawer where I kept my phone. I quickly dialed the number for my lawyer, praying that he would pick up. After a few rings, he answered. Hello, this is Peter. Peter, it's Margaret, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need help. I don't know what's going on, but there are people outside my house, and they're trying to take it from me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Peter spoke. Margaret, I don't know what's happening, but you need to get out of there right now. I'll call the authorities and have them send someone to help. No, I replied quickly, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. I'm not leaving. I need to know who they are and what they want. Peter hesitated. Margaret, please listen to me. These people are dangerous. You don't know who they are or what they're capable of. I felt a surge of anger, but I kept it under control. I've spent my whole life in this house. I'm not going anywhere until I understand what's going on. I could hear Peter sigh heavily. All right, just stay inside and lock all the doors. I'll get someone over there as soon as I can. I ended the call and looked back at John. They're sending help, I said, trying to calm my nerves. But I'm not running. Not this time. John didn't respond. He just stood there, his eyes flickering between me and the window. He had never seen me like this before. I was always the one who stayed calm, the one who took care of everything. But now, for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my own fear. I had no idea what was coming, but I was ready to face it. I took a deep breath and walked toward the front door, glancing once more at the men outside. They were still standing by the van, their faces hidden in the shadows. I couldn't tell if they were waiting for me to make a move or if they were planning something else entirely. Either way, I wasn't going to sit here and wait for them to come to me. I had to be the one to act first. As I opened the door just a crack, I peered out at them. They hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment, I thought I might be able to slip past them unnoticed. But then one of the men turned, his eyes locking onto mine. My heart skipped a beat. I slammed the door shut and backed away, my breath coming in quick gasps. They had seen me. I wasn't going to get away that easily. I turned to John, who was standing just behind me. They know I'm here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's only a matter of time before they make their move. He nodded grimly. We need to be ready. And in that moment, I realized that this was no longer just about protecting my home. It was about protecting everything I had left. I wasn't going to let them take it from me. Not without a fight. The men outside were still there, their figures lingering by the van. But the longer I watched, the more I realized something wasn't right. They weren't just standing idle. They were waiting. Waiting for me to make a move, or maybe waiting for something else entirely. I wasn't sure, but the sense of unease in my stomach only deepened. I stepped back from the door, my heart racing as I tried to think. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, hoping it was Peter with some kind of update. But it wasn't. It was a text message from an unknown number. You're not safe. Get out while you can. My mind raced. Who was this? How did they know what was happening? I didn't have time to question the message. I quickly deleted it, as if doing so would somehow erase the danger, but the tight feeling in my chest didn't go away. John, I said quietly, my voice shaky. We need to figure out what to do. We can't just sit here and wait for them to come to us. John nodded, his expression serious but distant. He had been pacing again, his hands running through his hair. You're right, he said, his voice strained. We have to act fast. I looked at him, seeing him in a new light. He wasn't just the gardener. He was scared, but he also seemed to know something that I didn't. And that knowledge was both comforting and terrifying. What are they after? I asked, trying to steady my voice. What do they want with my house? John didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced nervously toward the window again, his eyes flicking from the men outside to me, as if checking to see if I was really ready to face whatever was coming. He took a deep breath before speaking. There's something you don't know about this place, he said, his voice low. Something that's been hidden for a long time. I waited for him to continue, my curiosity growing stronger by the second. What do you mean? I pressed. What's hidden here? He looked at me, his face pale, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Fear. True fear. The house, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not just any house. It's part of something bigger, something that's been kept quiet for years. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. What are you talking about, John? He hesitated, as if weighing whether or not to continue, before he spoke again. There are old family secrets tied to this place. Things your family never told you. Things that go back generations. And those people outside, they know about it. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What kind of secrets? I asked, my voice shaking. John looked at me, then at the door, before finally speaking again. The house was built on land that's incredibly valuable. But not just because of the property. There's something buried here, something that people would kill for. His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. What could possibly be buried here that was worth all of this? I had lived here for years, and the only thing I knew was the house itself, the memories it held, and the quiet life I had tried to build. And these people outside, I began, my voice barely above a whisper, they want whatever is buried here. John nodded. Yes, they'll do anything to get it. And they think you know where it is. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They weren't just after my house. They were after something much bigger, something that had been hidden for years. And they thought I knew where it was. But I didn't. I had no idea what John was talking about. I don't know anything about this, I said, my voice rising in panic. I swear I don't know what they want. John's face softened for a moment, and he stepped closer to me. I know, he said gently. But they think you do. And that's why they're here. I turned away, my mind spinning. How could I fight something I didn't understand? How could I protect myself, my home, when I didn't even know what was at stake? The doorbell rang again, louder this time, almost demanding my attention. I froze. The men outside had made their move. They were coming. John stepped in front of me, his hand reaching for the door, but I stopped him. No, I said firmly. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not running. I looked at him, my resolve hardening. It's time to find out what they want. He looked at me, his eyes full of worry, but he didn't try to stop me. Instead, he nodded. All right. But whatever happens, be careful. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking slightly as I moved toward the door. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment I would finally understand what was going on, and hopefully, stop whatever was coming. I opened the door slowly, just enough to peek out. The men were standing there, their faces expressionless. They knew I was ready. And now, it was time to face them. As I slowly opened the door, my heart skipped a beat. The two men standing outside remained still, their faces unreadable, but their presence felt like a pressure on my chest. They didn't move, not even an inch. The silence between us was thick, hanging in the air like an unspoken agreement. I didn't know what I expected to happen next, but I certainly didn't expect them to stand there, waiting for me to speak first. My hands trembled slightly as I held the door, trying to steady myself. Can I help you? I asked, my voice firmer than I felt. One of the men, tall with sharp features, stepped forward just enough to be heard. We need to talk, he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. You know why we're here. I met his gaze, trying to mask the growing anxiety inside. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, forcing my voice to stay calm. The man exchanged a glance with his companion, who was still standing slightly behind him, his arms crossed. You're the one who's been hiding, the first man said, his tone growing harder. But you can't hide forever. My pulse quickened at his words, and for the first time, I realized just how serious this situation was. I wasn't just dealing with ordinary strangers. These men were here for something much bigger, something that threatened everything I had built. I'm not hiding, I said, though my words felt hollow even to me. I'm not hiding from anyone. The second man, who hadn't spoken yet, took a step forward. He was shorter, stockier, with a rougher appearance. His eyes were dark, piercing. Don't play games with us, he growled. We know what you have, and we know you're not going to give it up without a fight. I could feel my hands trembling more now, and my mind raced. What did they know? What was it that they thought I had? I had nothing of value except for this house. But there had to be more to it than that. I don't have anything, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You've got the wrong person. The tall man's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to us, he said, his voice chilling. We know exactly who you are, Margaret Harris. And we know you've been holding on to something for far too long. My breath caught in my throat at the mention of my name. How did they know my name? And what was it they thought I had? I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't hiding anything. Or so I thought. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. The tall man stepped closer, his face inches from mine. We want what's rightfully ours, he said, his voice low but firm. And we're not leaving until we get it. I could feel the weight of his words sink in, and for the first time, a cold dread settled over me. Whatever they were after, it wasn't just about money or property. It was something far deeper. And I had no idea what it was. My mind raced, trying to come up with a way out. But every idea seemed to fall apart as soon as it formed. I couldn't just hand over my home, my life. I had worked too hard to build everything I had. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was in way over my head. I wasn't dealing with ordinary men. I was dealing with people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. I don't have anything for you, I repeated, though I wasn't sure I believed my own words anymore. The tall man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they know they've already won. You have something, Margaret, he said, and we know where it is. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. They knew something I didn't. They knew about something in this house, something that had been hidden from me. I had no idea what it could be, but I knew that I couldn't let them take it. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice breaking as I stepped back from the door, trying to put distance between myself and the men. But the second man stepped forward, blocking the doorway. You can keep lying to yourself, but we know the truth. And soon, you'll see that there's no escaping it. I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. What was going on? What did they want? And more importantly, why did they think I knew where whatever they were after was hidden? I felt a surge of fear, but I didn't let it show. I'm not going to let you in, I said, my voice growing steadier. You're not welcome here. The tall man stepped back, giving me a cold, calculating look. You don't have a choice, Margaret. We'll get what we came for, with or without your help. I stood there, my heart racing as I watched them carefully. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I had no idea how I was going to get through this, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let them have what they wanted. I would fight to the very end to protect everything I had left. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally uncover the truth about what they were after. But for now, I had to stay strong, stay calm, and figure out what to do next. The men outside were still standing by the van, their presence unsettling and unwavering. My mind raced, every thought clouded with confusion and fear. I had no idea who these people were or why they were after something I didn't even know existed. But one thing was clear, they weren't leaving until they got what they wanted. I turned back to the door, my body trembling, but I refused to show any sign of weakness. I couldn't afford to. You need to leave, I said, my voice as steady as I could make it, even though my hands were shaking. The tall man outside glanced at his partner, then back at me. There was a cold, calculating look in his eyes. We'll leave when we have what we came for, he said, his tone unyielding. And you know exactly where it is. I clenched my fists, frustration rising within me. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice louder now, though still controlled. You're wasting your time. The second man, the one with the rougher appearance, stepped forward, blocking the doorway completely. We're not here to waste time, he said, his voice harsh. You may not know what we're after, but we know you do. And we're not leaving without it. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. The reality of the situation was sinking in. These men weren't going to back down. And neither would I. I had no choice but to figure out what they were after. I don't have anything, I said again, more forcefully now. Whatever it is you think I have, you're wrong. The two men exchanged another glance, one that sent a shiver down my spine. We'll see about that, the tall man said, his voice low. He stepped aside, motioning for me to step out. You're coming with us, he added, though there was no question in his voice. No, I said firmly, shaking my head. I'm not going anywhere with you. The second man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You don't have a choice, he said, his tone full of menace. The sooner you understand that, the better. I took a step back, feeling the weight of their presence closing in. But I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. Not now. I had worked too hard for everything I had, and I wasn't about to let them take it without a fight. I glanced around the room, my mind racing. There had to be something I could do, some way to get out of this. I'm not leaving, I said again, my voice stronger this time. If you want me, you'll have to come in and take me. The tall man's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to stand my ground. You're making a big mistake, he said, his voice cold. But we'll do this the hard way if we have to. I didn't back down. I stood there, facing them, trying to steady my breathing. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my mind working overtime to figure out a way out. I couldn't just let them take me. There had to be another way. I don't know what you're after, I said, my voice more measured now. But if you think I'm going to hand it over, you're wrong. The second man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that sent a chill down your spine. You're more stubborn than we thought, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. But it won't matter in the end. We'll get what we want, one way or another. I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I'm not afraid of you, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. But I had to say it. I had to stand my ground. The tall man looked at his partner and nodded. Get her, he said. The second man moved quickly, but I was ready. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding, but I wasn't going to run. I had to face this head on. As the second man reached for me, I shoved him back with all the strength I could muster. He stumbled, surprised, but quickly regained his balance. You think you can stop us? He growled, advancing again. But I wasn't going to let them intimidate me any longer. You don't know who you're dealing with, I said, my voice low and steady. I'm not going down without a fight. For a moment, the two men paused, their eyes narrowing, as if assessing my resolve. But I didn't give them time to react. I turned and bolted for the back door, praying I could get away before they realized what I was doing. My heart raced as I ran, every footstep pounding in my ears. I reached the door, my hand on the handle, but just as I was about to open it, I heard footsteps behind me. They were coming. Fast. There was no escape. My pulse quickened as I realized that my only option was to face them head on, to stand my ground and figure out a way to get the upper hand. I took a deep breath, turned around, and faced the men, ready for whatever was next. The back door was right in front of me, and my heart raced as I reached for the handle. My mind was already calculating my next move. If I could just get outside, I might have a chance to get away before they caught up with me. But as my hand touched the cold metal of the door, I heard a sound that froze me in my tracks. Footsteps. Fast. Getting closer. I spun around, instinctively taking a step back. The two men were just a few feet behind me, blocking my escape. The taller one gave me a cold smile, as if he had been expecting this move. You think you can outrun us? He asked, his voice low and mocking. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, but I refused to let it show. I had to stay calm. I had to think clearly. I'm not trying to outrun you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm just trying to get away. The second man, the one with the rougher appearance, took a step closer. You should have left when you had the chance, he said, his voice full of warning. Now, you're in it too deep. You can't escape. My breath quickened, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. I couldn't let them intimidate me, not now. I had to do something. Anything. I glanced around the room, my eyes darting to the nearest window. It was just within reach. Maybe if I could make it to the window, I could climb out and find help. I turned my back to them for a split second, just long enough to dart toward the window. I reached up, my fingers brushing the edge of the frame, but before I could get a good grip, the second man grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my skin, and I gasped in pain. Where do you think you're going? He growled. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, and I could feel the strength in his hold. I struggled against him, but the harder I tried to break free, the more he held on. I couldn't let this be the end. I couldn't let them win. With all my strength, I twisted my body, pulling my arm free from his grasp. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step back, my mind racing. I needed to think. You don't understand, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. I don't know what you want. I don't know where it is. The tall man watched me closely, his eyes narrowing. You're lying, he said, his tone cold. You know exactly what we're talking about. I shook my head, my hands trembling. I don't. Please, just leave me alone. For a moment, there was silence between us. They were both standing still, studying me as if they were waiting for me to crack, to reveal something they thought I was hiding. I wasn't hiding anything. I had nothing to give them. But in that moment, I realized that no matter how much I tried to convince them, it wasn't going to change their minds. I was their target, and I was the one they wanted. What do you want from me? I demanded. Again, my voice louder this time. The tall man took a step forward, his face unreadable. We want what's ours, he said simply. And we know you have it. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What was he talking about? What was so important that they had been watching me? I had lived here for years, but I had no idea what they were referring to. I don't have anything, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. I swear. The second man's expression darkened. We're done playing games, he said, his voice sharp. We'll get what we came for, one way or another. I didn't know what to do next. They had me cornered, and every move I made seemed to make the situation worse. I was running out of options. I had no idea what they wanted, but they were convinced I knew something. My eyes flicked back to the window, and I realized that there was only one option left. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything I had been through. I had to fight. I turned toward the door, my fingers fumbling for the handle, but the second man was quicker. He grabbed my wrist again, but this time, I was ready. I slammed my free hand into his chest, pushing him back with all my strength. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me the space I needed. I bolted toward the window, my heart pounding as I scrambled to open it. The tall man shouted something, but I didn't hear it. I was focused, determined to escape. The window creaked as I pushed it open, just wide enough to slip through. I didn't stop to look back. I didn't care if they were chasing me. All that mattered was getting away. I climbed out of the window, my hands slipping slightly on the sill, but I managed to hold on. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face as I dropped to the ground below. I didn't waste any time. I ran. My legs burned with the effort, but I kept moving, pushing myself faster and harder. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had to get out of there. I had to find a way to stop them. The road ahead was dark, but I didn't care. I kept running, not looking back, not slowing down. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there any longer. I couldn't let them find me again. The cold night air stung my face as I ran, each breath coming in ragged gasps. I couldn't tell how far I had gone or how much time had passed since I'd bolted from the house. All I knew was that I had to keep moving, had to get away from them. The pounding of my heart was deafening in my ears, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were still chasing me. I had no plan, no destination in mind. I was just running on instinct, my feet pounding the pavement as I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see them behind me. The streetlights flickered above, casting long shadows on the ground, but there was no sign of them. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were out there, watching, waiting for me to slip up. Every corner I turned, every alley I ran down, I felt their presence like a weight on my back. I had to get to the main road, to somewhere I could get help. But the more I ran, the more lost I felt. I had never been this far from home at this hour, and every street looked the same. I glanced at the houses around me, dark and quiet, as if the whole world was asleep and unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. I turned a corner and nearly ran straight into a car parked on the side of the road. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. I had to keep moving. I couldn't let them catch me. I took a deep breath and started running again, faster now, my mind racing with possibilities. What if they were already ahead of me? What if they knew where I was going? The thought sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't let it stop me. I had to keep going. The world around me felt surreal, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. The adrenaline was making everything blur together, and I couldn't tell if I was even still on the same street. I stopped for a moment, my chest heaving with exhaustion, and looked around. Everything was silent. The usual sounds of the night, distant cars, the rustling of leaves, were gone. It was like the world had gone completely still. I glanced back down the street, but there was no sign of them. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that I had gotten away. But I knew better. They were still out there, somewhere, and I wasn't safe yet. I pushed myself forward again, my legs aching with the strain, but I had no choice. I had to keep running. Every part of me was screaming to stop, to find shelter, to hide, but I couldn't. I had to keep moving. I had to find help. As I neared the end of the street, I saw the faint glow of headlights in the distance. A car. Someone was coming. My heart leaped in my chest, and I ran toward the light, praying that it wasn't another one of them. The car grew closer, and I slowed my pace, trying to steady my breath, to look like I wasn't running for my life. As the car passed, I waved my arms frantically, hoping the driver would see me. The car slowed but didn't stop, and I felt a surge of panic. Was it them? Had they caught up with me? But then the car passed completely, the headlights disappearing into the night. I was left standing in the street, alone again. The brief moment of hope faded as quickly as it had come. I couldn't keep running forever. I needed help. I had to figure out who was after me, what they wanted, and why they had been watching me. But for now, all I could do was keep moving. I had to find a way to turn the tables, to take control of this situation. I couldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them win. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but one thing was clear: I was done hiding. It was time to fight back.